Okay, good morning. We're on lesson 106 of the Workbook of A Course in Miracles. Let me be still and listen to the truth. Now, I'm not so certain I'm going to talk directly about the lesson, or maybe I might not even read it this morning, because there's been something on my mind since I've read this lesson last night, and it was just it's been in the back of my mind for some time. And this lesson speaks directly to me about my experience of being still and listening to the truth. If we will lay aside the ego's voice, however loudly it may seem to call, if you will not accept its petty gifts, which give you nothing that you really want, if you will listen with an open mind, which has not told you what salvation is, then you will hear the mighty voice of truth, quiet in power, strong in stillness, and completely certain in its message. Listen and hear your Father speak to you through His appointed voice, which silences the thunder of the meaningless and shows the way to peace to those who cannot see. And it goes on in the lesson to ask us to, in one sense, be that voice for others who may not be able to hear that voice, and bring the messages that the voice gives us to those that are sent to us to receive those messages that we have been given, in much the same way as we spoke of yesterday's lesson, where we give of what we've received as the way in which we can continue to receive. And this has been my experience for quite some time now. See, I'm naive. I just accept that my head is the hardest head in the universe to crack. And at 19, when I said no to Jesus' voice, when He said, "Are you ready yet to help me save the world?" And the implications in my own thinking were so grave that I didn't even get a chance to get the no out. The thoughts that I was thinking in regard to what it would take to say yes was a no. And that was the last I heard of that voice until much later on, until I was 33 years old, and the voice asked me the same question, and which I knew I couldn't say no to, because I was experiencing the consequences of having said to no and rejected Jesus, quite literally, consciously. It wasn't an unconscious rejection of the voice, it was a conscious rejection of the voice for God, the appointed voice that God had given to speak to me. And when I remembered that, and I heard it once again, I knew that it was time. I couldn't say no again. There would be no point to it. So I had no choice. And I said yes. And then the access to Jesus' voice was quite easy, in a sense. It was there whenever I required it. It helped me understand the lessons, the course. I would use it when I would come to some sort of anomalous experience in myself, where something within the course wasn't making sense, or I was in a situation where I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. It would immediately step in at my request when I would be still, when I would just say, wait, it would just show up. And then the tech crew came along as well. And since then, there have been other appointed voices that have spoken. Now, for me, the hearing of the voice comes with an experience that does not come when I hear voices in the world and listen to voices in the world, or even when I hear my own conscience. And we all know what that is. We all have, in a sense, a conscience. Let your conscience be your guide. We all have within us a conscience that is constantly speaking to us, but I don't find that voice to be any different than the voice of the ego, although it may be a counter voice to what I think The bad is, it is a counter voice to the bad, but it is not the voice that God has appointed to speak to me, because the experience is entirely different, and it's very questionable, and it's full of as much doubt as my own egoic voice. And being naive, having access to Jesus the way I did, and then discovering the Course months after that began, and Jesus was speaking to me the whole time prior to the discovery of the Course, I just assumed when I picked up the Course and began to meet Course students that they were likewise hearing Jesus, because I saw no reason. I don't know how I'm going to say this the right way. I saw no reason for all these good people. I saw no reason for all these good and respectable people to be able to hear the voice, because I was anything but a good and respectable person within my own judgment of myself. I was not that. I was not well-adjusted. I was not a good and respectable person. I was not, in a sense, well-adjusted in terms of dealing with and relating to the world. My world didn't seem to have the stability that these other people did. So I figured that if me, in the degenerate condition that I was in, could hear the voice, then of course all these respectable good people could likewise hear the voice as well. So I never questioned when they talked about hearing, and it wasn't until only recently when I began to wonder. Sometimes when I hear people who talk to me about hearing Jesus or the voice, what I get is it's just a recapitulation of the concepts that they read in whatever spiritual book they're reading that day. It's a recapitulation by their conscience that, in a sense, is just talking to them against their bad ego voice in order to get them to be good. And it seems to lack the experience of wholeness that comes to me when I listen to the appointed voice for God. And that, to me, is the distinction, because that is the showstopper. That is the showstopper, and that is the experience. When I talk to people in the world, there's a necessity to speak to both sides of the split in the mind. So we would have to talk about what something is and what something is also not. Now, when Jesus speaks, it's all encompassing. When the voice of the truth that has been appointed by God to speak to me speaks to me, there is no necessity to deal with the duality of a split mind whatsoever, because that voice is whole and perfect, and in the hearing of that voice is the experience of my wholeness and perfection that eliminates the ability to have, for the ego or my conscience, to have any say whatsoever, because it is certain, it is true, it is whole, it is perfect, and it's all inclusive because it includes me. In that sense, that is the voice of Christ. That is, in a sense, inclusive of my own true self. So when it says my salvation comes from myself, that's the self that it comes from. The self that is already joined, already whole, already perfect, and the representative of that self within this world I have come to accept as Jesus Christ, who underwent a resurrecting experience to demonstrate that there is no death, and that ended the ability for the world of space and time to have the same dire consequences any longer for any of us. And that's my experience. Now, I hear people all the time talking to me about what they hear, but it seems to be a conceptual hearing, a conceptual recapitulation of things that they've read that lack the experiential certainty to make what they're reading fact, in a sense, true. And I'm just now looking at this with you. Because it is the game stopper. It is the game changer. It is the experience of a self that's beyond question. And it also, there is no, it may offer me concepts, and it has also offered me, as this says, specific things to tell very specific people that are absolutely not generalizable, but are things that I have been asked to say to specific people in specific situations for a very specific reason, and I could have never, ever, ever, ever in this world have thought of them on my own. It would not be possible, because they're not within the realm of dualistic thought to be able to know with the certainty that comes along with the voice that it is even possible for it to be true. It's spoken to me to say things to people about things that I had no idea about, that when I was given to them, they wanted to know how I know those things. I don't. Me, this thing that sits in front of you as a body, who has experienced itself as an ego, and has dealt with the egoic voice since the beginning of time, and has dealt with the voice of its own conscience since the beginning of time, as the counter voice to the ego, as the thing that says, oh, when you say, well, I really want to do this, it says, no, don't do that, that's not good for you. That's not the voice for God at all. That's just my conscience attempting to be my guide, to try to adjudicate judgment and maintain the ability for judgment to be true as well. That's not the voice for God that I began to hear, thank God, because the voice for God leaves no room for doubt, leaves no room for anything other than your own reality. And this was a telling line. If you will listen with an open mind, which has not told you what salvation is, then you will hear the mighty voice of truth. Salvation isn't a conceptual idea based on the laws of some sort of church that require things to be done in order for you to be saved somewhere in the future. It's the experience of knowing your own wholeness and perfection, and knowing that you are whole and perfect beyond this little life that we think we live in, a body within a consciousness where other bodies conflict, other things conflict, and there's a conflicting understanding. And when I hear that voice, that true voice, there is no doubt about my own innocence, my own perfection, and the innocence of every single brother I could ever meet in this world, and every other brother there's ever been in this world, because it's all inclusive. It is the appointed voice for God. It is the voice of Christ. Now, the Holy Spirit is a little bit different than that, in a sense, but it is likewise the same experience. It leaves no doubt. It only imparts certainty. It only deals with reality. It may give me help within the illusion of space and time as to how to deal with the duality and the dualistic nature of the world, so I can circumvent the voices of the world and walk lightly past their meaningless persuasion, because it is so obviously not a voice from within this world. And yet I've heard many, many, many course students who claim that they hear the voice for God, and yet it's just sort of a babbling recapitulation of concepts that they don't quite understand, because there's no experiential backup to prove that they're true. There's a hope that they're true, that there's a desire for them to be true, yet there also seems to still be a judgmental compartment, a judgmental association existing, as if there is an opposite, as if there is an opposite to reality. I've never found that with the voice for God as Jesus. I've never found it in my experience of the Holy Spirit. Certainly, I've never found it within the tech crew. And they speak to me of my life in this world and how to navigate it all the time. So it's sort of been an interesting experience for me. I remember what my conscience used to do to me. My conscience, and if I could talk about it this way, seems to be just as if we were talking about the split mind as being good and bad, happy and sad, evil, evil and saintly, a sinner or a saint. My conscience is just the opposite side of whatever side of the split I'm listening to. In that sense, I know that my conscience can recapitulate these concepts and attempt to stop me from doing evil, or provoke me to do evil when I think I can do good. Now, when I hear the voice for God, when Jesus began to speak to me, the ability to take that as having any validity or relationship to the truth of who I am was gone. It is not true. And that's how I can discount the voice of the ego, because there is no truth to it, being dualistic by nature and, in a sense, maintaining the split and also reinforcing judgment. I don't know if this makes any sense to anybody, but it's what I was given to talk about today. Today, the promise of God's voice is kept. Hear and be silent. When God's voice was heard by me, I know that it was all achieved. When I heard Jesus and said yes to Jesus, when Jesus said to me, well, you already helped me to save the world. And then he said to me, you don't have to do this anymore because you're doing it to yourself. It just didn't mean I didn't have to do heroin anymore. It meant I no longer had to repeat space and time, because space and time was unreality, and I was enforcing unreality on myself. And if I had done that, there was a way to no longer do that. But it wasn't going to be because I listened to my conscience tell me what I should do as opposed to what I shouldn't do. It simply says, do this. And when I say yes, it is done. And that is the miracle. There's no doing. In a sense, I don't do anything. It does it all. It goes before me. It cleans up in back of me. It's like living from the center of your being, going backwards and forward at the same time. That's what happens when I hear the voice. It's a centering in reality of my being, with the recognition that outside of it there's nothing, and within it is the power of God, because I'm one with my brothers as the Christ. And it leaves no doubt. It is only certain. It is only whole. It is only perfect. And it is definitely not of this world, but it is definitely useful for me in this world, so I can fulfill what is being asked of me or offered to me in this lesson. I'm not sure if anybody hears me. I'm not even sure if this has anything to do with the lesson, so to speak. But I do know it's very important for me to let you know that it's entirely possible for you to hear that voice, that one voice. And you will learn your function from the one who chose it in your Father's name for you. That is the Christ. That's where all the choices have already been made, and they're only made for the truth, for reality, and for salvation, which is an unspeakable experience of certainty that none of this has ever existed, and in the fulfillment of our function, it will never have ever existed. It will preclude the ability for this dream to have ever occurred at all. That's what I'm talking about. I will be still an instant. I will be still listen to truth. What does it mean to give and receive? Well, the minute I receive, there's no choice but to give, because it's a single movement and action of mind that comes to me as what my reality is, and there is no question what it's being asked of me. Protect everything you value by the act of giving it away. It's not protect everything you value by tithing so you can make more money. it's whole, it's perfect, and it leaves you in the understanding that there is nothing in this world that you require, because there's nothing in this world, because the world is not real. And I am. And you are with me in that reality right here, right now.